I open my mouth unto the Lord, and I won't turn back no more. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end is going to be. I open my mouth unto the Lord, and I won't turn back no more. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end is going to be. The Jordan River is chilly and cold, to see what the end is going to be. It chills my body, but not my soul, to see what the end is going to be. Well, I open my mouth unto the Lord, and I won't turn back no more. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end is going to be. The music of the African diaspora, the seeds that we planted as we were scattered around the world, contain within them the expression of the despair, the trauma, the strength, the hope, and the faith of our people. Now, music has always been a part of the movement towards freedom. Always, not just within the African diaspora, but around the world. But the music of the African diaspora sits in that special place where it somehow seems to embody the whole world's movement to freedom. Now, sometimes it was the heartbreaking songs like, I am a poor pilgrim of sorrow, I'm left in this wide world to roam. No hope have I for tomorrow, except to make heaven my own. Sometimes I'm tossed and driven low. Sometimes I don't know where to roam. But I heard of a city called heaven, and I'm trying to make it my own. The West Africans who were brought here hadn't made this home. I'm not going to say this was home because it was not. And often when folks say, the songs of the African Americans, they were not Americans, they were Africans at that time. They didn't become Americans until much later. But the songs often had a lot of that religious reference as they were brought here and they learned the spiritual language of their oppressors. They wrapped that into their own spiritual expression and understanding, and they sang songs about heaven and home. Now, sometimes those songs meant, somewhere up there, but sometimes home meant freedom. I got a home up in that kingdom, ain't that good news? I got a home up in that kingdom, ain't that good news? I'm gonna lay down my crown, shoulder up my side, I forgot that word right there. I'm gonna take it home to Jesus. Just lay down my burden and shoulder up my cross. Ain't that good news? I got a father in that kingdom, ain't that good news? I got a father in that kingdom, ain't that good news? I'm gonna lay down this burden, shoulder up my cross, and I'm gonna take it home to Jesus. Ain't that good news? Now, home might have been Canada. Home might have been some other place where there was freedom. Home may have been all the way back to Africa. Home may have been death. But they had a home. Now, oftentimes, these songs sung out of the despair, out of the trauma, but with strength and with such faith that when I look back and wonder how they got over, I know it was faith. And they would sing about it. They would sing about it in the bush hobble, in the bush praise services. They would sing, how I got over, how I got over. I look back and wonder how I got over. I am sometimes up and I'm sometimes down. I look back and wonder how I got over, but still my soul is heaven bound. I look back and wonder how I got over. Well, I prayed and got over. I prayed and got over. I look back and wonder how I got over. And that song has been sung in praise houses and worship services and by gospel choirs for hundreds of years. As we look back and wonder how we got over, the faith that brought us over. Now, the songs weren't, while they were expressive of the emotion, of the feeling, of the desire and the faith, they were also active. So not only were they looking back, not only were they hoping, they were acting. They had in these songs coded messages to alert folk of opportunities to free themselves. They were not passively waiting for someone to come and get them. They used their songs, they used each other to support a movement. And they might sing a song like this, often used for worship services, but steal away. Steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here. Now there's a coded message in that song. It's like, hey y'all, there's a chance to go. Pay attention. Pay attention. You know, another coded message song, and I love, and in one way it's just so obvious, but you know, they didn't expect a whole lot out of us, so that was just fine. Underestimate me if you will. Sinner, please don't let this harvest pass. Sinner, please don't let this harvest pass. Sinner, please don't let this harvest pass and die and lose your soul at last. That was another song that was used to prepare people, to let them know an escape opportunity was at hand. Don't let this harvest pass. Don't die and lose your soul at last. Don't get left behind, and please, don't let us get caught. Now, I have a patron saint. Her name is Harriet Tubman. We are tight like this. We hang out. And when I was doing research about Saint Harriet, there was a story she told but after she had freed herself in 1850 and ended up in Canada with her niece, she decided to go all the way back to where she had been enslaved in Maryland and get her husband, John Tubman, because she loved him and she missed him. And she went all the way back to Maryland, the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and sent a message for him that she had come to get him, and he didn't want to go. He had gotten himself a new woman. He was okay. And she was heartbroken. At that time, she said she didn't care if the slave catchers got her. She didn't care what happened. But she said that she lay there like wanting to die for like 3 days, and then God spoke to her and said, "Get up." She said, "He don't want to go. Somebody else will." So she sent out a message. She said, "Y'all, I'm going back. And all y'all have to do is listen for the old woman singing in the street, because you know they won't pay no attention to no old woman singing in the street." And one of the songs she sang was, "It's the old ship of Zion. It's the old ship of Zion. It's the old ship of Zion. Get on board, get on board." Now, a tradition among African diasporic music is call and response. Now, this is a very traditional kind of one. Like the first line is lined out by the singer, "It's the old ship of Zion." And then y'all know the words for the next two lines. "It's the old ship of Zion. It's the old ship of Zion." And the chorus line, "Get on board, get on board." So you ready? "It has landed many a thousand. It has landed many a thousand. It has landed many a thousand. Get on board, get on board. Oh, King Jesus is the captain. Oh, King Jesus is the captain. Oh, King Jesus is the captain. Get on board, get on board. It's the old ship of Zion. It's the old ship of Zion. It's the old ship of Zion. Get on board, get on board. I love that. You know, there's lots of water references. Ships, down by the riverside. There's a song a young person in the back called out earlier today that I used to sing in church when I was a kid without actually knowing what was going on. But y'all probably know this song. If I saw Ron, I'd have him come join me, but he's not here right now. So, wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. You see that host all dressed in red. God's gonna trouble the water. They look like the children that Moses led. God's gonna trouble the water. Everybody wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Some years ago in the early 80s, Charles Bloxton, doing research on the Underground Railroad, wrote a book called Music and the Underground Railroad. And the ways many of these songs were used, like that one, because you know, ain't only one way to throw the dogs off your scent, right? Is to get in that water. Now, if you talk about getting in the water, y'all don't want to get in that water out there. There are things in that water that will kill you. There are snakes and gators and who knows what else. But some folk had to take some risks. They had to take their life into their hands for freedom. And they waded in the water. then they needed to wade in the water. You know, another good song that is a coded message song is a song that's often sung at Christmas. And I used to try to, and I was like, I don't even get what it's about, but Mary had a baby, hey Lord. Mary had a baby, hey my Lord. Mary had a baby, hey Lord. The people keep a-coming, but the train done gone. And once you know it's a coded message song, it's like, well, yeah. The escape opportunity had passed. So, your refrain is "A Lord," and the final line is "The people keep a-coming, but the train done gone." Mary had a baby, A Lord. Mary had a baby, A my Lord. Mary had a baby, A Lord. The people keep a-coming, but the train done gone. Where did she born in? A Lord. Where did she born in? A my Lord. Where did she born in? A Lord. The people keep a-coming, but the train done gone. She born him in a manger, A Lord. Born him in a manger, A my Lord. Born him in a manger, A Lord. The people keep a-coming, but the train done gone. Oh, I love it when folks sing harmony. There's a song that when I was growing up, we used to sing for communion. And then when I read Charles Bloxham's book, I heard that there was another use for that song. Some of you may know it. If you grew up church like me, you do. Let us break bread together on our knees. Let us break bread together on our knees. When I fall on my knees with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me. Well, if you're facing the rising sun, you're facing east. And that song sometimes was used to call a meeting on the east side of, I don't know, the field, the barn, the wooded copse. And that song would be sung, and I love that song, and y'all sound so good. And this is how songs were often used, the freedom-desired songs. They were couched in messages, because it was dangerous to just say, I want to be free. But then the Civil War, or the war between the states, or some folk, the war of Northern Aggression. And folk began to sing about their freedom much more clearly and much more directly. Now, in 1862, I think, and Ron let me know, the Union soldiers came down through the Port Royal Sound and got a foothold down in Beaufort. And from there, they launched their attack into Confederate territory. And when they got there, they found contraband that was left by the Confederates. And that contraband included props, buildings, barns, and Africans. At that time, they still didn't consider them quite human themselves, but it was determined that they would be freed. And the news got out that there was freedom and that there was a colored regiment being started out of there. And other colored regiments were coming down from the Northeast. And it was determined, and they found out that on the 1st of January, 1863, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation would be read. Now, among these folk who were there was a young woman named Charlotte Fortin. She was a fourth-generation free black woman who had come down from Philadelphia to participate in the Port Royal experiment. The whole world was watching this area of the country where these enslaved Africans were suddenly freed. And a school was started, the first freedmen's school. And the experiment was, what happens if we give these former contraband agency in their own lives? And Charlotte wanted to be a part of it. Now, Charlotte's grandfather, I believe, had fought for the British, in the Revolutionary War. Because they had said, if y'all fight for us, you enslaved folk, we will free you, we'll take you back to England. And he took them up on it. developed a trade as a sailmaker, and then for reasons unknown came back to the States and raised his family, educating them in Philadelphia. So down she came, and she began to record the songs and the spirituals that she heard being sung. The first ever records of spirituals were from St. Helena Island, written down by Charlotte Fortin and sent north to be published in the Atlantic, I believe. Well, one of her friends up that way was John Greenleaf Whittier. And when she heard that the Emancipation Proclamation was going to be read, she wrote him a letter and said, "Could you write a song that I can teach the school children so they could sing it on Christmas Day in 1862? And so he did. Now, it is on the back of one of your handouts. I just wanted you to have it because I think it's wonderful. I first heard this song at the old Penn School. My then boyfriend, well, he wasn't even my boyfriend then. He was just a really nice guy who wanted to take me out to Penn Center. And we went into the empty museum. There was nobody there. And on the wall, there was some poster board with these words written on it. And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "That's the St. Helena hymn." And I said, "How does it go?" And he stood there in that empty museum, and he sang me that song. And my life shifted just a little bit. Oh, none in all the world before, we're ever glad as we're free on Carolina's shore. We're all at home and free, thou friend and helper of the poor, who suffered for our sake to open every prison door and every yoke to break. Bend low thy pitying face and mild, and help us sing and pray. The hand that blessed the little child upon our foreheads lay. We hear no more the driver's horn, no more the whip we fear. This holy day that saw thee born was never half so dear. The very oaks are greener clad, the water's brighter smile. Oh, never shone a day so glad on sweet St. Helena's Isle. We praise thee in our song today, to thee in prayer we call. Make swift the feet and straight the way of freedom unto all. Come once again, O blessed Lord, come walking on the sea, and let the mainland hear the word that set the islands free. It's beautiful. And I always get like choked up. That hope in that last stanza. So, on the day the Emancipation Proclamation was read, the colored soldiers were standing there looking good and proud. Folk had gathered under the old oaks in Port Royal. And according to the journalist Charlotte Fortin, at that time, after it was read, she said spontaneously, they began to sing. I don't know how spontaneous it was, because I mean, they had the words and everything. But they began to sing, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrim's Pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring." Now, I grew up singing that. But when I read that, and that line, land where my fathers died, And at that point, no one could ever tell me I don't belong here. All these years later, that song has become, to me, a declaration of ownership. So let's do that together without me crying, because that would be cool. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. There's such power and there's such hope in that song, but everybody wasn't listening. So now the songs of freedom, y'all, this is why I should not wear mascara. So now the songs of freedom begin to take on a different tone. They aren't hidden anymore. They sing, no more auction block for me, no more, no more, no more auction block for me, many thousand gone, no more pint of salt for me, no more, no more, no more pint of salt for me, many thousand gone. They were clear. They sang, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. We aren't cultured in culturedness and in hidden messages. We're singing out loud about what we want, and we are taking active participation in claiming it for ourselves and with those who are allies and supporters. The Underground Railroad was an amazing organization of freedmen and enslaved people, of white and black, of men and women, who had come together and joined virtual hands in support of the movement to freedom. People willing to risk their lives, people willing to risk their livelihoods, wealthy white men willing to risk their monies. Folk who were enslaved willing to stay in the position in which they were enslaved so they could help somebody else get through. And they claimed it. Now, the story of freedom began to travel, right? Now, here in Georgetown, they were still busy producing rice because this was the wealthiest state in the Confederacy and they needed that money to support the Confederacy. But just down the road in Beaufort was freedom. And the news began to travel up the riverways, on the wind. Lord knows they did not have Facebook, but it began to travel. And folk began to make their way to freedom. It began to travel, but it didn't get everywhere. It didn't get everywhere. There were folk still enslaved who did not know that they did not have to be. And it was then on June 19th, 1865, when 2,000 Union troops finally made it to Texas and said, hey y'all, guess what? You have been emancipated. And the celebration that has become Juneteenth, when at the far western edge of the Confederacy, the news got there. And that news and that moment has been celebrated for many, many years certainly throughout the African American community, but now finally through the larger community, because who would not celebrate freedom? Who would not be thrilled that to let freedom ring throughout the country. Yes, it is an African-American featured, focused holiday, as well as should be, because we were the ones who were free. But this should be the celebration of everybody. Everybody. And as Greenleaf Whittier John wrote, and let the mainlands hear the words that set the islands free. Well, as we move forward, freedom, y'all, it's a movement. It's not a done deal. And as we move into the civil rights era, because, there was that great, wonderful moment, burst of joy and hope, and then there was the pushback. And so the movement continues. And in 1901, there was a man, his name was Charles Tindley. His daddy had been enslaved, his mama had been freed. He became a minister. And in 1901, he began to write. He published a song that he had written for the hymn books of his church. And that song was, I'll overcome someday, I'll overcome someday, if in my heart I do believe, I'll overcome someday. And that song was sung through many African-American churches. Now, as we've said, that the movement toward freedom song often supports that. And in Charleston, in the 40s, there was a strike. There was a strike over several things. There was the hospital workers' strike. Well, that was actually even later. That was later. There was, I think this was like a shipbuilder's strike. I can't remember what it was. Cigar factories. And so the people who were striking got together, and of course they looked for a song, and they would get together and they'd sing, I'll overcome someday, I'll overcome someday, if in my heart I do believe, I'll overcome someday. Now, some of these folk who were striking and organizing heard of a place in Tennessee called Highlander Center, where they helped organize protests. And so a group of women, strikers from Charleston, black women strikers, went to Tennessee. And while they were there, they were asked, so what are y'all singing? And so they said, well, we're singing, I'll overcome someday, I'll overcome someday, if in my heart I do believe, I'll overcome someday. And while they were there, they're like, oh, let's just change it. We'll overcome someday, we'll overcome someday, if in our hearts we do believe, we'll overcome someday. But those women went on back to Charleston, kept organizing and struggling, and having their blood, sweat, and tears soak into the soil of my country and theirs. Well, a couple of years later, Pete Seeger finds his way to Highland. And they're still singing that song. And he's like, oh, I like that song. I like that song a lot. But, he thought maybe he'll change it a little bit. Let's change some of the words a little bit. And then he wanted to change the first line, the tune. And he reached back to an old struggle song. No more ocean blood for me. And he said, yeah, we shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. He had a young, kind of apprentice, young guy I liked to hang out with him. His name was Guy Carawan. And Guy Carawan learned that song. And later, Guy Carawan came on down to Charleston, because there was more. This was now later. This was during the free days of the freedom schools and the hospital strike and others. And he said, "Oh, let me teach y'all a song Y'all probably never heard this. And he's saying to them, we shall overcome. And I love that full circle, man. I love that connection. He recorded it, and it became known basically as the song of protest, of the song of the movement toward freedom. And I'm very careful about my language when I'm saying the movement toward freedom, and not the struggle toward freedom. Because I do believe we are still moving in that direction. And sometimes it's a struggle. But I like to think of the movement of all of us, even in the face of things that look like they ain't happening. We are still here, and we are moving towards freedom. So that same year, stretch it back a little bit, that Tyndale wrote, I'll overcome someday. James Weldon Johnson and his brother were writing a song, and Ron talked to you about it a little earlier. He was writing it, he and his brother, James Weldon and Rosalind, were writing this song in honor of Abraham Lincoln's birthday. At the time, James Weldon Johnson was the principal of a school for black children. And he decided they were writing it for the choir to sing. And he says in his autobiography, at first he was trying to write down the words. And then the words began to take over him, and he put down the pen. And he began just walking in the room with these words, reciting them out loud. And then his brother put it to music, and they taught it, and it was sung by 500 school children. Now, for those of you who know the song, you know how it drops down into that da-da-da. That was because it was for the basses. But I have handed it to you today, and what I'm going to do first is just sing the first line, and then I want you to listen. I want you to hear this, and then I want you to join me. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound wide as the rolling sea. Now please stand and join me, and we will sing it again. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound wide as the rolling sea. And this is the part for the bass, but do your best. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Yes. Thank you. We're just going to do that verse really, James Clyburn suggested that it be a national hymn. Yeah. I mean, honestly, who doesn't want that? Regardless of where your ancestors came from, regardless of how they got here, who doesn't want that? So that would seem like a really great place to end, except for it's not yet. Just one thing. We started with some old songs, and I'm going to end with just one old one. And this is a song I attribute to Ron's mama. It was one of her favorite songs. Born and raised on St. Helena Island, educated at the Penn School, taught in the one-room classes, raised 9 children who she all somehow managed to get through college and everything else. I'll tell you, that woman, but one of her favorite songs is still one of mine because it's about the movement to freedom. Well, I come this far, I find no fault, I feel like journey on. I come this far, I find no fault, I feel like journey on. Well, I come this far, I find no fault, I feel like journey on. I come this far, I find no fault, I feel like journey on.